The blood on Nathan Northwood's hands had frozen solid by the time he dragged the orc's corpse into the snowbank behind his barn, and he told himself the shaking in his fingers came only from the cold. He had killed before. During his years as a militiaman on the border, he had fought in 3 campaigns against orc raiding parties, and the faces of the ones he had cut down still visited him some nights when the wind howled through the valley. But that was war, and this was supposed to be peace. This was supposed to be the quiet life he had earned after trading his sword for a plow. The life where the only blood on his hands came from butchering chickens, and the occasional accident with a farming tool. The orc had come in the dark of a January blizzard, and Nathan had heard the chickens screaming in their coop. He had grabbed the old militia sword he kept wrapped in oilcloth under his bed and run out into the snow without even pulling on his boots properly. The shape had been massive, hunched over the broken door of the chicken coop, and Nathan had not hesitated. The sword had found the gap between ribs with the muscle memory of 100 training drills, and the orc had fallen without even crying out. It was only after, standing in the blood-spattered snow with his heart hammering against his ribs, that Nathan had truly looked at what he had killed. The orc was old, the green skin weathered and scarred, the tusks yellowed with age. He wore no armor, carried no weapon except a crude knife at his belt. The chickens were unharmed, merely frightened, and Nathan realized with a sick twist in his stomach that the orc had probably only been trying to steal an egg or two. A hungry old orc, desperate enough to risk approaching a human farm in the dead of winter. Nathan had buried the body in the snow because the ground was too frozen to dig, and he had told himself he would report it to the constable in the village when the roads cleared. But winter had stretched on, and he never made that trip. By the time spring came and the snow melted enough to reveal what he had hidden, he had convinced himself it was better to let sleeping dogs lie. He dragged what remained deeper into the woods, where the wolves and crows would finish the job, and tried to forget. The orc girl appeared in late March, when the first green shoots were pushing through the mud and Nathan was in his field trying to coax his old plow horse into a straight furrow. He saw her standing at the edge of his property, where the cultivated land gave way to the dark line of the forest, and his first instinct was to run for his sword. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the way she stood, utterly still, her hands empty and visible at her sides. Maybe it was the fact that she was small for an orc, barely reaching his shoulder, with the lean build of youth rather than the heavy muscle of a warrior. Or maybe it was the look on her face, the way she stared at his barn with an expression he could not quite read. She had green skin, darker than spring leaves, more like the deep green of pine needles. Her black hair was braided back from her face, and small tusks protruded from her lower jaw. She wore rough homespun clothing, a tunic and leggings that had been patched many times, and no shoes despite the cold mud. She was young, Nathan thought, probably no more than 18 or 19 summers. Old enough to be dangerous, if she wanted to be, but something about her posture spoke of exhaustion rather than aggression. Nathan left his plow standing in the half-turned earth and walked toward her slowly, keeping his hands where she could see them. As he got closer, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow look of someone who had not eaten well in a long time. She watched him come with no expression on her face, and when he was 10 paces away, she spoke. "This is the Northwood farm." Her voice was rough, the words accented but clear. "It is," Nathan said carefully. "I am Nathan Northwood. What is your business here?" The orc girl was quiet for a long moment, and Nathan had the strange sense that she was weighing something, making a decision. Finally, she said, "I am looking for work. I can labor in the fields, tend animals, repair fences. I am strong and I do not eat much." Nathan stared at her. In all his years on the border, in all the time since he had taken over this farm from his uncle, he had never heard of an orc asking a human for work. The two peoples did not mix. Orcs kept to their clans in the deep forests and the mountain valleys, and humans kept to their farms and villages, and when they met it was usually with weapons drawn. "Why would you come here?" he asked. "Because I have nowhere else to go," she said simply. "My clan cast me out. I have been wandering for weeks and I am tired. If you will not hire me, I will move on, but I thought I would ask." There were a dozen reasons Nathan should have said no. The neighbors would talk. The villagers would be suspicious. The constable might even cause trouble, given the tensions that still simmered along the border. But Nathan looked at this girl, this young orc who stood in the mud at the edge of his field with her chin raised and her shoulders squared despite the exhaustion written on her face, and he thought of the old orc he had killed in the snow. The old orc who had died for trying to steal an egg. "What is your name?" he asked. "Groka," she said. "Can you truly work, Groka? Farm work is hard." "I am orc," she said, and there was a flicker of something like pride in her voice. "I have worked hard since I was old enough to walk." Nathan rubbed his jaw, feeling the stubble that had grown there over the past few days. This was foolish. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of thing that would bring trouble down on his head. But he heard himself say, "I cannot pay much. Copper coins and meals. You can sleep in the barn loft if you can stand the smell of the animals." Groka's expression did not change, but Nathan saw her shoulders drop just slightly, as if some great tension had released. "I accept," she said. That was how it started. Nathan showed her the barn, cleared a space in the loft where the hay was cleanest, and gave her an old blanket that had been his uncle's. He brought her a bowl of the stew he had made the day before, and watched as she ate it slowly, carefully, as if she was afraid it might be taken away. Then he put her to work. She had not lied about being able to labor. Groka worked like someone possessed, hauling water, mucking out stalls, carrying loads that made Nathan wince to look at. She spoke little, and when she did it was only to ask what needed doing next. She did not complain, did not rest unless Nathan ordered her to, and did not meet his eyes more than was necessary. The neighbors noticed, of course. Nathan's farm was not isolated enough for an orc to go unnoticed, and within 3 days the first visitors arrived. Old Jerome from the next farm over came with his sons, ostensibly to borrow a hammer but really to stare at Groka where she was mending a section of fence. The village priest came to express his concern for Nathan's soul and the safety of the community. Even the constable rode out, a stern-faced man named Morris who had fought in the wars and made no secret of his hatred for orcs. "You are playing a dangerous game, Northwood," Morris said, sitting in Nathan's kitchen and refusing the offer of ale. "That thing could cut your throat in your sleep." "She is not a thing," Nathan said, surprised by the heat in his own voice. "Her name is Groka, and she is working for room and board. There is no law against it." "There is no law because no one has ever been fool enough to try it," Morris said. "The people in the village are already talking. They remember the raids. They remember the farms burned, the families killed. You were a militiaman, Nathan. You fought against the orcs. How can you trust one under your own roof?" "She sleeps in the barn, not under my roof," Nathan said. "And I do not trust her. But I do not trust most people, if I am honest. She works hard, she causes no trouble, and I need the help. That is all there is to it." Morris left shaking his head, and Nathan knew the man would be watching for any excuse to cause trouble. But Groka kept working, and Nathan kept his word about the copper coins and the meals, and slowly something like a routine developed. It was 2 weeks before Groka spoke to him about anything other than work. Nathan was repairing the gate to the pig pen, struggling with a hinge that had rusted through, when she approached and knelt beside him without a word. She took the hinge from his hands, examined it for a moment, then produced a small file from her pocket and began working on the rust with quick, efficient movements. "You know metalwork?" Nathan asked. "Some," Groka said. "My father was a smith. He taught me." It was the first personal thing she had shared, and Nathan found himself curious despite his better judgment. "Is that why your clan cast you out? For learning a trade?" Groka's hand stilled on the file. "No," she said quietly. "They cast me out because I refuse to hate." She did not elaborate, and Nathan did not press. But something shifted between them in that moment, some small crack in the wall they had both been maintaining. Groka finished fixing the hinge, helped him rehang the gate, and then went back to work without another word. But that night, when Nathan brought her dinner, she looked him in the eye and said, "Thank you." Spring deepened into early summer, and the work of the farm intensified. Nathan planted his fields with Groka's help, and he found that she had a surprising knowledge of growing things. She could tell when the soil was ready by the smell of it, could judge the weather by the way the birds flew, could work from dawn to dusk without flagging. Nathan had been managing the farm alone since his uncle died 3 years ago, and he had forgotten what it was like to have help, to share the burden. They fell into a rhythm. Nathan would wake before dawn and start the fire, and Groka would come in from the barn to help prepare breakfast. They would work together through the morning, break for a midday meal, then work until the light failed. In the evenings, Nathan would sometimes read by the fire, old books his uncle had left him, while Groka sat outside the door and carved small figures from scraps of wood. She never asked to come inside beyond the kitchen, and Nathan never quite found the words to invite her. It was in June, when the wheat was beginning to turn gold, that Nathan made the connection he had been avoiding. He had been oiling his old militia sword, something he did periodically more out of habit than need, when Groka came into the barn and froze at the sight of it. Her face went pale under the green of her skin, and her hand moved unconsciously to her side, as if reaching for a weapon that was not there. "That is a cavalry blade," she said, her voice tight. "You were a soldier." "I was," Nathan admitted. 5 years with the border militia before I came here. I never talk about it much." Groka stared at the sword for a long moment, and Nathan saw her throat work as she swallowed. "Did you kill many of my people?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. Nathan could have lied, he could have deflected, but he found he did not want to. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did my duty as I understood it at the time. I fought in battles and I killed. It is not something I am proud of, but it is the truth." He expected anger. He expected her to leave or to attack him, or at least to retreat back behind the walls they had slowly been dismantling. Instead, Groka simply nodded, as if he had confirmed something she already knew. "I thought so," she said. "You move like a fighter. You are always aware of where things are, of how to reach a weapon quickly." "Does that frighten you?" Nathan asked. "No," Groka said. She met his eyes, and there was something ancient and sad in her gaze. "My people have warriors too. We are not so different, your kind and mine. We both fight for our homes, for our families. We both tell ourselves we are doing what is right." She turned and walked out of the barn, and Nathan sat holding his sword and feeling like he had been struck. That night, he wrapped the blade back in its oilcloth and pushed it deeper under his bed, where he would not have to look at it so often. The summer heat came in full force, and with it came the hard work of tending the growing crops. Nathan and Groka worked side by side in the fields, hoeing weeds and chasing crows and praying for rain when the sky stayed stubbornly clear. The physical labor left them both exhausted by nightfall, but there was a satisfaction in it too, in seeing the results of their work growing green and strong. It was during those long summer days that Nathan began to truly see Groka as a person rather than simply an orc. He noticed the way she hummed sometimes while she worked, a low, tuneless sound that seemed to soothe the animals. He saw how gentle she was with the chickens, how she could calm Nathan's temperamental plow horse with just a few soft words. He caught her smiling once, just a small quirk of her lips, when a family of rabbits bounded across the field in front of them. And he noticed other things too, things he tried not to let himself dwell on. The way the sunlight caught in her black hair, the strength in her arms and shoulders as she lifted heavy loads, the rare times she laughed at something, a rough bark of sound that made him want to hear it again. He reminded himself that she was an orc, that she was here only because she had nowhere else to go, that allowing himself to feel anything beyond simple human decency was foolish and dangerous. But the reminders did not seem to stick as well as they once had. One evening in late July, after a particularly grueling day of harvesting the first wheat, Nathan brought 2 cups of ale out to where Groka was sitting on the fence, watching the sunset. He offered her one, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. "You do not have to drink it," Nathan said. "I just thought you might like it." Groka sipped carefully, then made a face. "It is bitter." "It is cheap," Nathan admitted. "The good stuff costs more than I can afford, but it helps after a long day." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from gold to orange to deep purple. Finally, Groka said, "Why did you say yes when I asked for work? You could have sent me away." Nathan had asked himself that question 100 times over the past months. He still did not have a good answer. "I suppose," he said slowly, "I was tired of being alone, and you looked like you needed help. It seemed like the right thing to do." "Most humans would not agree," Groka said. "Most humans are not sitting on my fence drinking my ale," Nathan said. "I have never been very good at doing what most people think I should do. It is one of the reasons I left the militia." Groka turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were dark and thoughtful. "Do you regret it, hiring me?" "No," Nathan said, and he was surprised to realize it was true. "You are the best worker I have ever had, and you have helped me save this farm. If people want to gossip about it, let them. I know what is true." Something shifted in Groka's expression, a warmth that had not been there before. "You are strange," she said, "for a human." "I will take that as a compliment," Nathan said, and Groka's lips quirked in that small, almost smile again. August brought thunderstorms that rolled down from the mountains and soaked the fields, and Nathan worried about the wheat rotting before they could bring it in. He and Groka worked frantically during every break in the weather, cutting and bundling the grain, hauling it to the barn to dry. It was back-breaking labor, and there were nights when Nathan fell into bed so exhausted he could barely remember eating dinner. It was during one of those storms, when the rain was hammering on the roof, and the wind was howling through the eaves, that Nathan woke to the sound of screaming. He bolted upright, heart pounding, and it took him a moment to realize the sound was coming from the barn. He grabbed a lantern and ran out into the rain, his nightshirt plastered to his skin within seconds. Groka was in the barn loft, thrashing in her blankets, crying out in a language Nathan did not understand. He climbed the ladder quickly and knelt beside her, setting the lantern down. "Groka," he said, reaching out to shake her shoulder. "Wake up. You are dreaming." She came awake with a gasp, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist with bruising force. For a moment her eyes were wild, unfocused, and Nathan thought she might attack him. But then recognition flooded her face, and she released him as if burned. "I am sorry," she said, her voice ragged. I did not mean I was. It is all right, Nathan said. You were having a nightmare. It happens. Groka pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. She was shaking, and Nathan realized she was cold as well as frightened. Without thinking, he pulled the blanket up around her shoulders. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. No, Groka said. Then, after a long pause, it is always the same dream. I am looking for someone, but I cannot find them. I search and search, and there is blood everywhere, and I know I am too late, but I cannot stop looking. Nathan knew something about nightmares. He had his own, dreams of battles and dying men, dreams where his sword was stuck in its sheath and the enemy was bearing down on him. I get them too, he said quietly. From the war. They fade with time, but they never quite go away. Groka looked at him, and in the lamplight he could see tear tracks on her cheeks. You understand, she said. It was not a question. I do, Nathan said. They sat together in the barn loft while the storm raged outside, and Nathan found himself telling her things he had never spoken aloud. About the first man he had killed, a young orc barely older than Groka was now, and how the boy's face still haunted him. About the friends he had lost, the good men who had died for a cause Nathan was no longer sure he believed in. About the guilt that gnawed at him sometimes in the dark hours before dawn, and Groka, slowly, told him her own story. About her father, a smith who had believed that orcs and humans did not have to be enemies. About how he had tried to trade with human settlements, to build bridges between the peoples. About how the clan elders had called him weak, called him a traitor, and about how he had gone out one winter night to trade for medicine for a sick child and never come back. About how Groka had searched for him for weeks, how she had followed his trail to the edge of human lands, and how she had eventually given up and returned home. About how the elders had blamed her for not stopping him, had cast her out for being her father's daughter. I know he is dead, Groka said, her voice empty. I know it in my bones. He would not have stayed away otherwise, but I never found his body. I never got to say goodbye. Nathan felt something twist in his chest, a feeling he could not name. He wanted to offer comfort, but he did not know how. So he simply sat with her, and when she finally lay back down and pulled the blanket over herself, he stayed until her breathing evened out into sleep. Then he climbed back down the ladder and returned to his own bed, but he did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, neither of them mentioned what had happened. They went about their work as usual, bringing in the last of the wheat, tending the animals, preparing for the harvest that would come in the fall. But something had changed. The walls between them had crumbled a little more, and Nathan found himself watching Groka when she was not looking, wondering about things he had no business wondering about. September came, and with it, the hard work of harvest. Nathan's small farm did not produce enough to make him wealthy, but it was enough to live on, enough to pay his taxes and save a little for winter. He and Groka worked from before dawn until after dusk, cutting the vegetables, digging the root crops, preserving what they could. Nathan paid Groka her wages every week, the copper coins he could barely afford, and every week she took them without comment and tucked them away in a leather pouch she kept hidden somewhere in the barn. The first frost came in early October, and Nathan knew he needed to make a decision. Winter was coming, and the barn loft would be bitter cold once the snow arrived. He could not in good conscience let Groka freeze out there, but inviting her into the house felt like crossing a line he was not sure he was ready to cross. For 3 days he wrestled with himself, and finally, over dinner in the kitchen, he said, "You should move into the house for the winter." Groka's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What?" "The barn will be too cold," Nathan said, not meeting her gaze. "There is a spare room, my uncle's old room. It is small, but it has a window and a decent bed. You have earned it with all the work you have done." "Nathan," Groka said, and it was the first time she had used his name without prompting. "I cannot. The neighbors already talk. If I move into your house, they will talk no matter what," Nathan interrupted. "Let them. I am not going to let you freeze to death in my barn because I am worried about gossip." Groka was quiet for a long time, and Nathan could see her struggling with something. Finally, she said, "If you are certain." "I am certain," Nathan said, and he was. Groka moved into the spare room the next day, carrying her few possessions up the narrow stairs. Nathan gave her clean linens for the bed, showed her how to work the latch on the window, and tried not to think about how strange it felt to have another person living in his house. He had been alone here for 3 years, and before that it had been just him and his uncle, a taciturn old man who had spoken perhaps 10 words a day. Having Groka here, hearing her footsteps on the floorboards, catching the scent of the herbal soap she used, it all felt both alien and somehow right. They developed new rhythms. Groka would come down in the mornings and help Nathan prepare breakfast, and they would eat together at the old wooden table. She would wash the dishes while he tended the fire, and then they would go out to do the day's work. In the evenings, Nathan would sometimes read aloud from his uncle's books, and Groka would sit and listen, her hands busy with her carving. She was getting quite good at it, Nathan noticed. The little wooden figures she made were starting to look less like lumps and more like actual animals and people. October deepened, and the trees turned gold and red. Nathan took a wagon load of produce to the village market, and Groka stayed behind, knowing that her presence would cause trouble. When Nathan returned, she was waiting by the gate, and he realized she had been worried. "I am fine," he said, climbing down from the wagon, "though I heard plenty of opinions about you from the good people of the village." "What did they say?" Groka asked. "Nothing I care to repeat," Nathan said. "Let us just say that the consensus is that I am a fool who is going to get himself killed." "And what do you think?" Groka asked. Nathan looked at her, standing there in the autumn sunlight with her arms crossed and her chin raised, and he felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "I think they do not know what they are talking about," he said. The smile Groka gave him then was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, and Nathan had to look away before she could see what was surely written on his face. It was in early November, when the first snow was threatening, and Nathan was in the woods cutting firewood, that he found the bones. They were in a ravine about a mile from his farm, half buried in leaves and picked clean by scavengers. But the skull was unmistakable. It was an orc skull with the heavy bone structure and the jutting tusks, and next to it, rusted and broken, was a crude knife. Nathan stood there in the cold woods, staring down at the remains, and felt his stomach drop. He knew these bones. He knew that knife. This was the old orc he had killed last winter, the one who had come to his chicken coop in the blizzard, the one he had buried in the snow and then tried to forget. He thought about Groka's nightmare, about how she had searched for her father and never found his body. He thought about what she had told him, about her father going out one winter night to trade for medicine and never coming back. He thought about the timing, about the fact that it had been January when the orc came to his farm, and about how Groka had said she had followed her father's trail to the edge of human lands. No, Nathan thought. No, it could not be. It was a coincidence. There were many orcs in the forest, and many of them might have come this way. Just because this one was old, just because he had been unarmed, just because he had been desperate enough to risk approaching a human farm, that did not mean he was Groka's father. But Nathan knew, with a sick certainty that settled in his bones like ice, that he was lying to himself. He knew. And the worst part was, he had to make a choice now. He could rebury these bones, could say nothing, could let Groka go on believing her father had died somewhere far away. Or he could tell her the truth and watch her hate him for what he had done. Nathan stood in the woods until the light began to fail, and then he carefully gathered the bones. He wrapped them in his cloak and carried them back to the farm, and he hid them in the back of the barn where Groka would not stumble across them. Then he went into the house and made dinner with shaking hands, and when Groka came in and asked if he was all right, he lied and said he was just tired. That night, Nathan lay awake in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the old orc, about how he had probably been trying to trade something for the medicine Groka had mentioned. How he had been cold and desperate and old, and how Nathan had run him through without hesitation, because that was what you did with orcs in the dark. You did not ask questions. You did not think. You just fought and you killed, and you told yourself it was necessary. Nathan had left the militia because he was tired of killing. He had come to this farm to find peace, to live a simple life where his hands would only be stained with honest dirt, but the war had followed him here. It had been here all along, buried in the snow, waiting for him. In the morning, Nathan was hollow-eyed and quiet. Groka asked him again if something was wrong, and again he lied. They worked through the day, preparing the farm for winter, and Nathan felt like he was moving through water, everything slow and difficult. He kept looking at Groka, at the way she moved, the way she smiled at the animals, the way she had slowly become part of his life. And he thought about how he was going to destroy that. 3 days passed, and Nathan could not bring himself to tell her. He knew he was a coward, but the words would not come. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment, but he knew there would never be a right moment for something like this. It was Groka who finally forced the issue. She cornered him in the barn one evening when he was checking on the animals before bed, and she said, "Nathan, what is wrong? You have been acting strange for days. If I have done something to upset you, please tell me." "You have done nothing wrong," Nathan said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "It is not you, it is me." "Then tell me," Groka said. "Please, I thought we were beyond keeping secrets from each other." Nathan looked at her, at the concern in her eyes, and something broke inside him. "I found something in the woods," he said. "Bones, orc bones, and I think I am almost certain they belong to your father." Groka went very still. "What?" "There was a night last winter," Nathan said, the words coming faster now, tumbling over each other. "It was January during a blizzard. Something came to my chicken coop in the dark. I thought it was a raider. I grabbed my sword and I went out and I killed him. An old orc, unarmed, just trying to steal an egg or trade for something. I killed him, Groka. I ran him through and he died in the snow, and I buried him because I was afraid of what would happen if anyone found out." The silence that followed was so complete Nathan could hear his own heartbeat. Groka stared at him, and he watched the understanding dawn on her face, watched the color drain from her skin. "You," she whispered. "It was you." "I did not know," Nathan said, and he hated how desperate he sounded. "I swear to you I did not know who he was. I did not even know he was your father until I found the bones and realized the timing. But that does not excuse what I did. I killed an unarmed old man because I was afraid, because I did not stop to think. And I am sorry. God, Groka, I am so sorry." Groka took a step back, then another. Her hand went to her side, and Nathan realized she was reaching for a weapon she did not have, the same unconscious gesture she had made when she first saw his sword. "All this time," she said, her voice shaking, "I have been living here working for you, eating your food, and all this time you are the one who killed my father." "I did not know it was him," Nathan said again, but the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "Does that matter?" Groka's voice rose, sharp and jagged. "You killed him. You killed an old orc who was just trying to help a sick child, and you hid his body like he was nothing, like he did not matter. And then when I came here looking for work, looking for anywhere to go because my clan blamed me for his death, you took me in. Why? Was it guilt? Did you think you could make up for what you did by giving his daughter a job? No, Nathan said. That is not. I did not make the connection until a few days ago. When you came here, I just saw someone who needed help. I do not believe you, Groka said. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I cannot believe anything you say. You are a killer, Nathan Northwood. You are exactly what my father always said humans were not. He believed you could be reasoned with, that you could learn to see us as people. And your people murdered him for it, and you buried him in the snow like garbage. She turned and ran from the barn, and Nathan did not follow. He stood there in the dim light, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the animals, and felt like his chest had been carved open. He had known this would hurt her. He had known she would hate him. But knowing and experiencing were two different things, and the look on her face would haunt him for the rest of his life. Nathan did not sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen and listened to the sounds of Groka moving around upstairs, packing her few possessions. He waited for her to come down to leave, but she did not. The hours stretched on, and eventually the house fell silent, and Nathan dozed in his chair as the fire burned down to embers. He woke to the sound of someone moving around the kitchen. Gray dawn light was filtering through the windows, and Groka was standing by the stove, starting the fire for breakfast. She did not look at him as she worked, her movements jerky and angry. You do not have to do that, Nathan said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. You do not have to stay. I will understand if you want to leave. Where would I go? Groka asked, still not looking at him. My clan cast me out. I have no family, no friends, nothing. I have been saving my wages, but I do not have enough yet to go anywhere else. So I am stuck here, working for the man who murdered my father because I have no other choice. The words were like knives, and Nathan took them because he deserved them. I am sorry, he said. I know that means nothing, but I am. You are right, Groka said. It means nothing. She finished starting the fire and left the kitchen without making breakfast, and Nathan sat alone at his table and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. He had been happy, or at least content, for the first time since leaving the militia. He had found companionship, purpose, maybe even the beginning of something more. And now it was ashes, destroyed by a choice he had made almost a year ago in the snow. The days that followed were the worst of Nathan's life. Groka stayed, but she barely spoke to him. She did her work with the same efficiency as always, but there was no warmth in it, no spark of the connection they had built over the summer. She was civil but distant, and Nathan found himself missing the easy rhythm they had developed. He tried to give her space, tried to respect her anger, but it felt like he was losing something precious and he did not know how to stop it. A week passed, then two. The first real snow came, blanketing the farm in white, and Nathan found himself thinking about that night in January. He remembered the sound of his sword finding flesh, remembered the way the orc had fallen without a sound. He had told himself at the time that he had done the right thing, the necessary thing. He had been protecting his property, defending himself. But now he knew the truth. He had been a frightened man with a sword, and he had killed an old orc who was probably as scared as he was. It was in late November, during a particularly cold snap, that things came to a head. Nathan was in the barn, checking on the animals when he heard Groka cry out. He ran to the house and found her in the kitchen, clutching her hand. Blood was dripping between her fingers. What happened? Nathan asked, already moving to grab clean cloth. I was cutting vegetables, Groka said through gritted teeth. The knife slipped. Nathan pulled her hand away from her body and examined the cut. It was deep, running across her palm and bleeding freely. "This needs to be stitched," he said. "Sit down." "I can do it myself," Groka protested, but Nathan was already guiding her to a chair. "You cannot stitch your own hand," he said. "Just sit still and let me help you." He had learned basic field medicine in the militia, and while he was not skilled at it, he knew enough to clean and close a wound. He worked quickly, washing Groka's hand with clean water, then threading a needle. "This is going to hurt," he warned, and then he began to stitch. Groka did not flinch, though Nathan could see the tension in her jaw. He worked as carefully as he could, making small, neat stitches, tying them off securely. When he was done, he wrapped her hand in clean cloth and tied it off. "Keep it clean and dry," he said. "Change the bandage every day. It should heal clean if you are careful." "Thank you," Groka said quietly, and Nathan looked up to find her watching him. There was something in her expression he could not read. "Groka," Nathan said, still holding her bandaged hand. "I know I cannot undo what I did. I know you have every right to hate me, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. That night in the snow I was afraid. I did not think. And that is not an excuse, but it is the truth. I have regretted killing your father since the moment I realized what I had done, and knowing that it was your father has only made it worse. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not deserve forgiveness, but I am sorry. I am so sorry." Groka looked down at her bandaged hand, then back up at Nathan. Her eyes were wet. "I know you are," she said. "I have known since you told me. I can see it eating at you, the guilt. And I hate that it makes me feel sorry for you because I should hate you. I want to hate you. But I cannot, and I do not know why." "You can hate me," Nathan said. "It is all right. I hate myself enough for both of us." "That is the problem," Groka said. "You are making it very difficult for me to hate you when you keep doing things like saving me from freezing in your barn and feeding me and stitching up my hand and looking at me like—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Never mind." "Like what?" Nathan asked. Groka pulled her hand away from his and stood up. "It does not matter. Thank you for fixing my hand." She left the kitchen, and Nathan sat there feeling like he had just had a conversation where he had missed half the words. He did not know what Groka had been about to say, but something in her tone had made his heart beat faster. 2 days later, a blizzard rolled in from the north, the kind of storm that turned the world into a white wall and made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. Nathan and Groka spent the day securing the animals, bringing in extra firewood, and making sure everything was battened down. By evening, the wind was howling around the house, and the snow was piling up against the windows. They ate dinner in silence, and then Nathan built up the fire in the main room and settled down with one of his books. Groka sat across from him, working on her carving, and for a while the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. It was almost peaceful, and Nathan found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Nathan," Groka said suddenly, and he looked up from his book. "I have been thinking about what you said, about that night." "What about it?" Nathan asked carefully. "You said you were afraid," Groka said. "That you did not think, and I believe you. But I need to understand something. If it happened again, if another orc came to your farm in the night, would you do the same thing? Would you kill first and ask questions later?" Nathan set down his book and thought about the question. A month ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. It was what he had been trained to do, what any sensible person living on the border would do. But now, after everything, he was not so sure. "No," he said finally. "I do not think I would, not after knowing you. Not after understanding what I took from you. If it happened again, I would try to talk first. I would try to see the person instead of the monster." "But you cannot be certain," Groka said. In that moment, in the dark, with your heart pounding and the fear taking over, you might do the exact same thing. You are right, Nathan admitted. I cannot be certain, but I would try. That is all I can promise. Groka was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. I have been angry at you, she said. So angry. But I have also been angry at myself because I understand. If the situations were reversed, if a human had come to my clan's camp in the dark, I do not know that I would have done any differently. We have been at war for so long that we do not know how to see each other as anything but enemies, and that is what killed my father. Not you specifically, but all of us. All of this hate and fear that we carry. Your father was trying to change that, Nathan said. You told me he believed humans and orcs did not have to be enemies. He did, Groka said, and it got him killed, so maybe he was wrong. Or maybe he just did not live long enough to see it work, Nathan said. You are here, Groka. You came to a human farm asking for work, and I said yes. We have been living and working together for months now. Maybe that is a start. A start of what? Groka asked. Nathan did not have a good answer for that. He looked at Groka, at the way the firelight played across her face, and he felt that warm unfurling in his chest again. I do not know, he said honestly, but I would like to find out. The blizzard lasted 3 days, and Nathan and Groka were trapped inside the house together. They played cards with an old deck Nathan found in a drawer. They took turns reading aloud from his books. They cooked together, simple meals made from the stores they had put away for winter. And slowly, incrementally, the wall between them began to crumble again. On the 3rd day, when the wind finally died down and they could see the sun again, Groka said, I think I am ready to see him. My father. The bones you found. Nathan led her out to the barn, to the back corner where he had hidden the carefully wrapped bundle. He had cleaned the bones, had done his best to treat them with the respect they deserved. Groka knelt beside them and carefully unwrapped the cloak, and Nathan saw her shoulders begin to shake. I will leave you alone, Nathan said quietly, but Groka shook her head. Stay, she said. Please. So Nathan stayed, and he watched as Groka said goodbye to her father. She spoke in her own language, words Nathan did not understand, and she touched the bones gently, reverently. She cried, and Nathan wanted to comfort her but did not know if he had the right. Finally, when her tears had slowed, she looked up at him and said, We need to bury him properly. In the spring, when the ground thaws. There is a ritual in my culture. Will you help me? Of course, Nathan said. Whatever you need. Groka stood and carefully wrapped the bones again. Thank you, she said, for keeping them safe, for telling me the truth even though you knew it would hurt. I should have told you sooner, Nathan said. Maybe, Groka agreed. But I understand why you did not. I am not sure I have forgiven you, Nathan. I am not sure I ever can fully, but I do not hate you. And I think that is enough for now. Winter settled in for real after that, and Nathan and Groka fell into a new rhythm. They were more careful with each other now, more gentle, as if they both understood how fragile this peace between them was. But there was also a new honesty, a willingness to talk about difficult things. One night, as they sat by the fire, Groka told Nathan about her mother, who had died when she was young. About her childhood in the orc clan, about the games she had played and the skills she had learned. About how different her life might have been if her father had not been so determined to build bridges between the peoples. And Nathan told Groka about his own family, about the parents he had lost to fever when he was 16. About his uncle, who had taken him in but had been a hard, unloving man. About why he had joined the militia, because he had needed money and purpose and had not known where else to go. About the things he had seen in the war, the things that had made him question everything he had been taught about orcs. You are not what I expected, Groka said one evening. When I came here, I thought all humans were the same, cold, cruel, only interested in their own survival. But you are different." "I am not that different," Nathan said. "I killed your father, remember? I am capable of the same cruelty as anyone." "But you regret it," Groka said. "That is the difference. You are capable of seeing what you did wrong, of changing. Most people never manage that." Nathan did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But he thought about it later, lying in his bed and listening to the wind howl outside. He thought about change, about growth, about the possibility of becoming something better than what you were. Christmas came, and Nathan marked it quietly. He had never been particularly religious, but his uncle had always kept the tradition, and Nathan found comfort in maintaining it. He made a special dinner, roasted one of the chickens, and even found a bottle of decent wine he had been saving. He invited Groka to join him, and she accepted. "Is this a human holiday?" she asked as they ate. "It is," Nathan said. "A religious one, technically, but most people just use it as an excuse for a good meal and some time with family." "You do not have any family," Groka pointed out. "No," Nathan agreed, "but I have you, if that is all right." Groka looked at him for a long moment, and then she smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "It is all right," she said. After dinner, Nathan gave her a gift, a new knife he had bought from the blacksmith in the village. It had a good blade and a sturdy handle, and Groka turned it over in her hands with something like wonder. "This is too much," she said. "You need a good knife," Nathan said. "For your carving, if nothing else, and it is Christmas. People give gifts at Christmas." Groka disappeared upstairs and came back a few minutes later with something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to Nathan, looking almost shy. "I made this for you," she said. "I am not very good yet, but I tried." Nathan unwrapped the cloth and found a wooden carving of a horse, clearly meant to be his old plow horse. It was rough, the proportions not quite right, but Nathan could see the care that had gone into it. "This is wonderful," he said, and he meant it. "Thank you, Groka. You like it?" Groka asked. "I love it," Nathan said, and the smile she gave him made his chest ache. January came, and with it the anniversary of the night Nathan had killed Groka's father. Neither of them mentioned it, but Nathan could feel the weight of it hanging over them. He went out into the woods and stood at the place where he had found the bones, and he said a prayer for a man he had never known, a man who had tried to build peace and had died for it. When he came back to the house, Groka was waiting for him. "I know what today is," she said. "I have been dreading it for weeks, but I want you to know that I am glad I am here with you and not alone." "So am I," Nathan said. February was brutal, with storms that buried the farm in snow and temperatures that made it dangerous to be outside for more than a few minutes. Nathan and Groka spent most of their time inside, huddled by the fire, and Nathan became acutely aware of how close they were, how often their hands would brush as they cooked or cleaned, how her presence filled the house in a way that felt essential. He tried not to think about what that meant. He tried to tell himself that what he felt was just gratitude, companionship, the bond that forms between people who have survived hardship together. But he knew he was lying. He was falling in love with her, had probably been falling for months, and the realization terrified him. It was wrong. She was an orc, and he was the man who had killed her father. There was no world in which this could work, no future where they could be together without facing hatred and violence from both their peoples. And even if none of that were true, why would she want him? He had taken everything from her. He had destroyed her life. The fact that she could even stand to be in the same room as him was a miracle. To hope for more than that was pure selfishness, but knowing it was wrong did not make the feelings go away. Nathan lay awake at night, listening to Groka move around in the room above his, and he ached with wanting. He wanted to hold her, to tell her how he felt, to kiss her and feel her smile against his lips. He wanted things he had no right to want, and the guilt of it mixed with the desire until he felt like he was being torn in two. March came eventually, bringing warmer temperatures and the first signs of spring. The snow began to melt, revealing the brown earth beneath, and Nathan knew it was time to keep his promise. He and Groka chose a spot on a hill overlooking the farm where the wildflowers would bloom in the summer. They dug the grave together, and Groka performed the rituals of her people, singing songs in her language and arranging the bones just so. When it was done, they stood together beside the grave, and Groka said, "My father would have liked you, I think. He would have been happy to know that I found someone who saw me as more than just an orc." "I wish I could have known him," Nathan said. "I wish I could have learned from him instead of killing him." "He would have forgiven you," Groka said. "He believed in forgiveness, in second chances. He believed that people could change. I think he was right." She took Nathan's hand and they stood there on the hill as the sun set, and Nathan thought that maybe, just maybe, there could be a future here. Not an easy one, not without pain and difficulty, but a future nonetheless. Spring work began in earnest and Nathan and Groka threw themselves into it. They plowed the fields, planted the seeds, tended the animals. The days grew longer and warmer, and the world came back to life around them. Neighbors still watched with suspicious eyes, and the constable still rode by more often than was necessary, but Nathan and Groka ignored them. They had their work and they had each other, and that was enough. It was in April, when the first green shoots were pushing up through the soil, that Nathan finally broke. They were working side by side in the garden, planting vegetables, and Groka said something that made him laugh. She smiled at him, that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face, and Nathan felt something snap inside him. "Groka," he said, and his voice came out rough. "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her smile fading into concern. "What is it?" Nathan set down his trowel and wiped his dirty hands on his pants. "I have been trying not to say this. I have been telling myself it is wrong, that I have no right, that you could never feel the same way. But I cannot keep it inside anymore. I am in love with you, Groka. I have been for months now, and it is killing me to pretend otherwise." Groka stared at him, her eyes wide. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything," Nathan interrupted. "I know this is impossible. I know I am the last person you could ever care for. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you the way you have been honest with me." "Nathan," Groka said again, and this time there was a tremor in her voice. "You are an idiot," Nathan blinked. "What? You are an idiot," Groka repeated, "if you think I do not feel the same way. I have been in love with you since last summer, since you brought me ale and sat with me on the fence. I have been fighting it because it seemed wrong, because you killed my father and I should hate you. But I do not hate you. I love you, and I do not know what to do about it." Nathan could not breathe. He stared at Groka, at the tears running down her cheeks, and he felt like the world had just shifted beneath his feet. "You love me?" he asked, because he needed to hear it again. "Yes," Groka said. "I love you, you stupid human man. And I do not care if it is wrong or impossible or doomed. I love you." Nathan moved without thinking. He closed the distance between them and kissed her, and Groka made a surprised sound against his mouth before kissing him back. She tasted like earth and sunshine and everything good, and Nathan wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. They kissed like drowning people gasping for air, desperate and hungry, and full of everything they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Groka laughed shakily. "We are covered in dirt," she said. "I do not care," Nathan said, and kissed her again. They made love that night in Nathan's bed, and it was awkward and fumbling and absolutely perfect. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Nathan traced the line of Groka's jaw with his fingers and marveled at how right this felt. "I love you," he said, because he could say it now, because she wanted to hear it. "I love you too," Groka said. "Even though you are terrible at plowing straight furrows and you snore." "I do not snore," Nathan protested, and Groka laughed and kissed him to shut him up. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Nathan's life. He and Groka worked the farm together, ate their meals together, and slept in the same bed every night. They did not hide their relationship, though they did not go out of their way to flaunt it either. The neighbors noticed, of course, and the gossip reached new heights. But Nathan found that he did not care. Let them talk. He had found something precious, something worth fighting for, and he was not going to give it up for fear of what people might think. It was in May, as they were working in the fields, that the trouble finally came. 3 men from the village rode up to the farm, and Nathan recognized them as part of the local militia. Their leader was a man named Marcus Norris, a cousin of the constable, and he had a reputation for being harsh with orcs. "Northwood," Marcus said, not bothering to dismount. "We have heard some disturbing reports about you keeping an orc here. We have come to investigate." "Groka is not a prisoner," Nathan said evenly. "She works here of her own free will, and she is paid for her labor. There is no law against it." "There is no law against it yet," Marcus said. "But there are laws against fraternizing with the enemy, and we have heard you are doing more than just employing her." "What I do on my own land is my business," Nathan said. He could feel anger building in his chest, hot and sharp. "It becomes our business when it threatens the safety of the community," Marcus said. "Orcs are dangerous, Northwood. You are a militiaman. You know this. Whatever you think you feel for this creature, it is not real. She is using you, and when the time is right, she will turn on you. Or worse, she will bring her clan down on all of us." "Groka has no clan," Nathan said. "She was cast out for being her father's daughter, for not hating humans enough. And she is not dangerous. She has worked harder than any man I know, and she has never given me cause to fear her." "Then you are a fool," Marcus said. He finally dismounted, and his men followed. "We are taking her into custody. She will be held in the village until we can verify her story and determine whether she poses a threat." "You are not taking her anywhere," Nathan said. He could feel Groka tense beside him, could see her preparing to run or fight. "We have the authority of the constable," Marcus said. "Do not make this difficult, Northwood. Step aside." "No," Nathan said. Marcus sighed, and his hand went to the sword at his belt. "I was hoping you would be reasonable. But if you insist on protecting this orc over your own people, then you leave us no choice." The fight was brief and brutal. Nathan grabbed a hoe and swung it at Marcus, catching the man across the shoulder before he could draw his sword. One of the other men lunged at him, and they grappled in the dirt. Nathan could hear Groka shouting, could see her trying to pull one of the men off him. And then there was a crack, and pain exploded across the side of his head. When Nathan came to, he was lying in the dirt and Groka was kneeling over him, her hands pressed to his bleeding scalp. Marcus and his men were still there, but they were keeping their distance. "Nathan," Groka said urgently. "Nathan, please wake up." "I am awake," Nathan managed. His head felt like it was splitting open. "We need to go," Groka said. "They are going to come back with more men. We need to leave." "No," Nathan said. He struggled to sit up, ignoring the way the world spun. "This is my land. I am not running." "Nathan, they will kill you," Groka said. "Or they will arrest you and hang you for treason. Either way, you will die. Please, we need to go." Nathan looked at Marcus, who was watching them with cold eyes. "She is right, Northwood. You have made your choice. You are a traitor to your own kind now. The only question is whether you want to die here or have a chance at running." "I will give you until sunset," Marcus continued. "Take your orc and go. If you are still here when we come back, we will burn this farm to the ground with both of you inside it." He and his men mounted their horses and rode away, and Nathan sat in the dirt and tried to process what had just happened. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, was being taken away because he had dared to love someone he was not supposed to love. "Nathan," Groka said gently, "we have to go. I am so sorry. This is all my fault. If I had never come here, do not," Nathan said sharply. "Do not apologize for existing. This is not your fault. It is theirs for being too blind and hateful to see past your skin." "But your farm," Groka said. "Your home." Nathan looked around at the land he had tended for 3 years, at the house his uncle had left him, at the fields he had planted with his own hands. And then he looked at Groka, at the woman he loved, and he made his choice. "It is just land," he said. "You are more important." They packed quickly, taking only what they could carry. Nathan grabbed his old militia sword, some food, and a few things of value he could sell. Groka took her small bag of savings and the knife Nathan had given her at Christmas. They left everything else behind, and as they walked away from the farm, Nathan did not look back. They traveled north into the mountains where the border was less defined, and people asked fewer questions. It was hard going, especially for Nathan, whose head wound made him dizzy and nauseous for the first few days. But Groka was strong, and she half carried him when he stumbled, and slowly they made progress. They found shelter in an abandoned trapper's cabin, a small rough structure that had probably not been used in years. It was better than sleeping in the open, and Nathan and Groka set about making it livable. They repaired the roof, cleaned out the debris, and scrounged what furniture they could from the surrounding woods. "This is not much of a life," Nathan said one evening as they sat by the fire, "living in a broken-down cabin in the middle of nowhere." "It is a life with you," Groka said. "That is enough." Nathan pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "I am going to marry you," he said. "I do not care if there is no priest who will do it, no law that recognizes it. I am going to make you my wife, Groka, in whatever way I can." "Yes," Groka said simply. "Yes." They married themselves, a week later, in a clearing near the cabin. There were no witnesses except the trees and the birds, no rings except 2 bands Nathan carved from wood, no ceremony except the vows they spoke to each other. But it was real and it was binding, and when Nathan kissed his wife for the first time, he felt like the luckiest man alive. They made a life in the mountains. Nathan hunted and trapped, and Groka tended a small garden near the cabin. It was hard work, and there were days when they were cold and hungry and exhausted. But they had each other, and that made all the difference. Summer came, and with it a surprise. A group of orcs appeared near their cabin, and Nathan's first instinct was to reach for his sword. But Groka stepped forward, raising her hands in greeting, and Nathan saw that the orcs were not raiders. They were a small clan, displaced by human expansion, looking for a place to settle. Groka spoke to them in their language, and Nathan watched as she explained who they were and what they were doing here. The orcs were suspicious at first, eyeing Nathan with distrust, but Groka vouched for him. And slowly, tentatively, an understanding was reached. The orc clans settled nearby, and over the following months, Nathan and Groka became a bridge between 2 worlds. Nathan taught some of the younger orcs how to trap and hunt in the mountains. Groka helped Nathan understand orcish customs and language, and gradually, the barriers began to break down. More people arrived, both orc and human. Outcasts, refugees, people who did not fit in the places they had come from. They were drawn to this place where an orc woman and a human man had proven that coexistence was possible. And a community began to form, rough and imperfect but real. Nathan built a proper house for him and Groka, with a bedroom and a kitchen, and even a small porch where they could sit in the evenings. Groka worked with the orc smiths to set up a forge, and she began to practice the trade her father had taught her. And together they created something new, something that neither humans nor orcs had managed alone. Years passed. The settlement grew, and Nathan and Groka grew with it. They faced challenges, of course. There were humans who came looking to drive the orcs out, and orc clans who raided the settlement thinking it was weak. But they defended what they had built, and slowly their reputation spread. The place where humans and orcs lived in peace. The place that should not exist, but did. Nathan never forgot the farm he had lost, or the price he had paid for loving Groka. But he did not regret it. How could he, when he woke up every morning next to the woman he loved, when he looked out at the community they had built together, when he saw the children, both human and orc, playing together without fear or hatred? One evening, 5 years after they had fled into the mountains, Nathan and Groka sat on their porch and watched the sunset. Groka was pregnant, her belly round with their child, and Nathan could not stop touching it, marveling at the life growing inside her. "Do you think your father would be proud?" Nathan asked. "Of what we have built here?" Groka was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on her belly. "Yes," she said finally. "I think he would be very proud. He always believed this was possible. He died trying to make it happen, and now we have." "We have," Nathan agreed. He leaned over and kissed her soft and gentle. "I love you, Groka Northwood." "I love you too," Groka said, "even though you still cannot plow a straight furrow." Nathan laughed, and Groka laughed with him. And as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, they sat together and watched their world. A world they had built from blood and pain and love. A world that proved that change was possible, that people could grow beyond their hatred, that a human man and an orc woman could find happiness together. It was not the life Nathan had planned. It was not the quiet, peaceful existence he had dreamed of when he left the militia. But it was a good life. It was a life full of love and purpose and hope for the future. And that, Nathan thought as he held his wife close, was more than enough. The baby came in the autumn, a daughter with her mother's green skin and her father's brown eyes. They named her Alina, after Nathan's mother, and she was the first child born of both human and orc blood in living memory. The settlement celebrated her birth, and Nathan held his daughter in his arms and cried tears of joy. Groka recovered quickly from the birth, her orc constitution making her resilient. She was a natural mother, gentle and patient, and Nathan found himself falling in love with her all over again as he watched her with their child. The years continued to pass. Alina grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions about everything. More mixed couples formed in the settlement, and more children were born. The community thrived, and word of it spread further and further. Eventually, even some of the human villages and orc clans that had been hostile began to send delegates, curious about this place where the impossible had become reality. Not everyone was convinced, and there were still those who saw the settlement as an abomination. But slowly, incrementally, attitudes began to shift. Nathan watched it all with a sense of wonder. He had been a soldier once, a man who killed without thinking. He had murdered an old orc in the snow because he was afraid. And that single act of violence had set in motion a chain of events that had changed his entire life. It had brought Groka to his door, had forced him to confront his own prejudices and fears, had cost him everything he owned and given him everything that mattered. One day, when Alina was 7 years old, and the settlement had grown to nearly 200 people, a rider came from the south. It was Constable Morris, older and grayer but still recognizable. Nathan met him at the edge of the settlement, his hand on his sword, ready for trouble, but Morris raised his hands in peace. "I am not here to fight, Northwood," he said. "I am here to talk." They sat in Nathan's house, and Morris looked around with something like amazement. "I heard the stories," he said, "but I did not believe them. Humans and orcs living together, raising families, it seems impossible." "It is not impossible," Nathan said. "It is just difficult. But most worthwhile things are." Morris was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I owe you an apology, and more than that, I owe you thanks. What you have built here, it is giving people hope. There are those in the villages who are starting to question the old ways, who are wondering if we have been wrong about the orcs all along. You have started something, Northwood, something important." "Groka and I started it together," Nathan corrected, "and we did not do it alone. Everyone here has contributed." "Still," Morris said, "I wanted you to know that there are people who see what you have done, who appreciate it, and who want to help it continue." Morris left the next day, but his visit marked a turning point. More and more humans began to come to the settlement, not as refugees or outcasts, but as people genuinely interested in learning about orcish culture and building relationships. The old hatreds did not disappear overnight, but they began to fade, replaced by curiosity and, eventually, understanding. Nathan grew older. His hair went gray and his joints ached in the cold, but he was content. He worked in the community forge with Groka, teaching the next generation of smiths. He told stories to the children, both human and orc, about the old days and the mistakes that had been made and the importance of choosing love over fear. He watched Alina grow into a strong, intelligent young woman who had her mother's determination and her father's kindness. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he had killed Groka's father, Nathan and Groka climbed the hill where they had buried him and paid their respects. They would talk about what had been lost and what had been gained, about the pain of the past and the hope of the future. And Nathan would thank that old orc in his own way for being brave enough to try to change things, even if he had not lived to see the results. 20 years after they had fled into the mountains, Nathan and Groka's settlement had become a small town. It had a name now, Riverside, after the river that ran through it. It had shops and schools and a town hall. It had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose cooperation over conflict. Nathan was an old man by then, his beard white and his body bent, but he was happy. He sat on his porch with Groka, who was still strong and vital despite the years, and they watched their grandchildren play in the yard. Alina had married a human man who had come to the settlement seeking a new life, and they had given Nathan and Groka 3 beautiful grandchildren. "Did you ever think," Groka asked one evening, "that night when I showed up at your farm, that this was where we would end up?" "No," Nathan admitted. "I thought I was making a simple decision to hire a worker. I had no idea it would change everything." "Would you do it again?" Groka asked. "If you could go back, knowing what you know now, would you make the same choice?" Nathan did not even have to think about it. "Yes," he said. 1,000 times yes. Everything I have, everything I am, everything that matters to me in this world came from that choice. I would not trade it for anything." Groka leaned her head on his shoulder, and Nathan wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that as the sun set, 2 old warriors who had fought their way to peace, who had built a life and a legacy out of blood and pain and love. Nathan died peacefully in his sleep 5 years later, with Groka holding his hand. He was buried on the hill beside Groka's father, and the entire town came to pay their respects. Humans and orcs stood side by side as they mourned the man who had helped change their world. Groka lived another 10 years, and she used that time to ensure that the work she and Nathan had started would continue. She wrote down their story, had it translated into multiple languages, and sent copies to every village and clan that would accept them. She wanted people to know what they had built, and how. She wanted them to understand that change was possible, that love could overcome hate, that the barriers between peoples were illusions that could be shattered with courage and compassion. When Groka finally died, she was buried beside Nathan, and their grave became a place of pilgrimage. People came from all over to see where the impossible had become real, where a human farmer and an orc girl had built a future together, despite everything that should have kept them apart. Their story lived on, passed down through generations. It became legend, a tale told to children to teach them about acceptance and understanding. And while the world they had left behind was still imperfect, still struggling with old hatreds and new conflicts, the seed they had planted continued to grow. In Riverside, human and orc children played together without fear. Mixed families raised their children in peace. And on the hill overlooking the town, 3 graves stood together under the sky, a monument to the price of hatred and the power of love. Nathan had started as a man who killed without thinking, who buried his shame in the snow and tried to forget. But he had become something more. He had become a builder, a bridge, a symbol of what people could be if they chose to change. And though he was gone, his legacy remained, written in the very stones of the town he and Groka had built, carved into the hearts of everyone who lived there. The farmer had realized too late that the monster he killed was her father. But the orc girl had known, had seen past her pain and anger to the possibility of something better. And together, they had built a world where that terrible moment could become the foundation for hope. It was not a perfect ending, but it was a good one, and in the end that was enough.